And speaking of jokes, yesterday the world had a jolly good laugh at poor old Rudy Giuliani's black hair dye running down the side of his face as he sweated his way through a 90-minute press conference about the allegations of fraud in the US election. And yes, it was pretty funny, excruciatingly so. Trump may not have conceded, but Rudy's hair dye sure has, was one of my favourites. Unfortunately, Grecian Gate gave the world's media the perfect excuse to avoid reporting on what Giuliani and his two lawyers, including Jenna Ellis, who was on this show last week, and Sidney Powell, were explaining, namely the extent of the fraud and why the election was, in their view, criminally compromised. Have a listen to this news story from yesterday.
The state of Michigan is back in play. On Thursday, President Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, announced that the Wayne County Board of Canvassers has, in fact, not certified the vote. Giuliani said there is not only evidence of fraud, but massive fraud in Wayne County, with many times the number of registered voters casting their ballots. The wildly contested battleground state, which Democrats have been calling for Joe Biden since election night, now appears to be up in the air, with odds favoring a Trump victory.
You won't hear it on the mainstream media, but the simple reality is that the odds of Trump ultimately being declared the winner of this election is no different to what the odds were of George Pell ultimately being found innocent. Remember when you were demonised for even daring to suggest that Pell might not, actually have done it? The media assured us of his guilt. All the gutless politicians went out of their way to condemn him. Every commentator demonised him, with the exception of Andrew Bolt and a couple of others. A few people went, whoa, hang on, there's something not quite right about all this. And indeed, they were right. The High Court unanimously confirmed the truth. So I say to you, think very carefully before you write Trump off. I was here in the Sky studio on election day. We all saw the numbers and Trump was way, way ahead. Graham Richardson even called it for Trump mid-afternoon. Later that night, weird things started happening. Like in no other election I've ever seen, polling booths inexplicably and simultaneously being shut down, boxes of ballots mysteriously appearing out of the back of Porsches, and we all woke up to find Joe Biden being declared the clear-cut winner. Except it's still not all that cut and dry.
This witness goes on the witness stand and she will say, I was told to adjust the date on the absentee ballots. I witnessed election workers and employees going over to the voting booths with voters in order to watch them vote and coach them for whom to vote.
There are three main areas that demand answers. Firstly, you've got all the anecdotal evidence of unacceptable and indeed fraudulent behaviour by voting officials, Republican scrutineers being shunted away and so on. I've covered all that before. Then you've got all the whistleblowers, such as the woman who claims she witnessed several instances where poll workers would count the same stack of 50 ballots over and over again, sometimes up to 10 times, transforming that stack of 50 votes into a group of 500, and all for Joe Biden. Then you've got the statistical implausibilities. There's heaps of them, like this graph that clearly shows a massive and mathematically impossible spike for Joe Biden votes at 3:47 in the morning in Wisconsin. And there's others like it. But it gets worse. The real villains in the piece, and you are going to be hearing, I suspect, a lot more about them, are the highly suspect voting machines and the companies that run them and who they are connected to, such as the Dominion voting machine company, who even boast in their training manual that, it's their words, not mine, that the software allows staff to adjust the tally after reviewing the scanned ballots. What? Why? Then, running these voting machines, you've got sinister individuals with both the motive and the opportunity to rig the election. Dominion's vote-counting software chief programmer, Eric Coomer, is alleged to have been caught on a Zoom meeting boasting to Antifa cell leaders that Trump won't win. I made effing sure of that. Coomer was a programmer who wrote the main code that is used in Dominion software, which is used in the most critical states. Just that one fact, forget all the rest of it, throws the whole election result into doubt. Let's not forget, we ban athletes for years for simply having a molecule in their urine that suggests they cheated. And yet we're supposed to turn a blind eye to allegations of mass cheating on industrial scale in the race to decide the leader of the free world? Seriously? And if you think the hard left in America aren't so corrupt, so immoral, so devious, so sanctimonious, and so determined that they wouldn't break every law and shred every ethic to get their man in the White House, well, you haven't really been paying attention much over the last few years, have you? But here's the deal, as the beneficiary of all this dubious activity likes to say. Here's the thing. The mainstream media, which for over 2 long years salivated over every meaningless, pimple-sized detail in the imaginary Russian collusion hoax, the scandal which, by the way, was predicated on the idea that, some Russian fake Facebook accounts convinced people to vote for Trump. Oh, wow, let's investigate. That same media is now completely ignoring an erupting Mount Vesuvius of suspicious and illegal voting activity across the US. Come on, man. So here's just a few highlights that you won't have seen on the lefty media. This, for example, is Jenna Ellis, a regular here on Outsiders, at Giuliani's press conference before the hair dye started running.
So what you've heard now is basically an opening statement. This is what you can expect to see when we get to court to actually have a full trial on the merits, to actually show this evidence in court and prove our case. This is not a Law and Order episode where everything is neatly wrapped up in 60 minutes. We select our president through the Electoral College not because it disenfranchises voters, but because it is a security mechanism for exactly the type of corruption that we are uncovering. And every American should be grateful and thankful that our founders had the foresight to put in those protections and provisions to make sure that your legitimate legal vote is not disenfranchised.
And here's Sidney Powell, one of the most experienced and successful legal minds in the US.
We have witness testimony that the same things were done in those countries as this was exported from Venezuela and by Maduro and by Mr. Chavez and by Cuba. And of course, we know China also has a substantial presence in Venezuela and substantial interest in making sure that President Trump does not continue in office. This is the consummate foreign interference in our election in the most criminal way you can possibly imagine. That's why you see massive spikes after hours when people were told that all the votes were in and all the votes were counted. Many Dominion employees have already reached out to us to tell us the truth. They are Americans who want to ensure election integrity like we do. I would encourage every Dominion or Smartmatic employee who is fed up with the corruption in this country to come forward as soon as possible, because these are serious federal offenses that I am confident the Department of Justice will be in pursuit of in very short order if they are not already.
The truth must and will prevail in the end, whatever that truth is, and however unbelievable and however uncomfortable that truth may be for many, many people.
This is stunning, heartbreaking, infuriating, and the most unpatriotic acts I can even imagine for people in this country to have participated in any way, shape, or form. And I want the American public to know right now that we will not be intimidated. American patriots are fed up with the corruption from the local level to the highest level of our government, and we are going to take this country back. We are not going to be intimidated. We are not going to back down. We are going to clean this mess up now. President Trump won by a landslide. We are going to prove it. And we are going to reclaim the United States of America for the people who vote for freedom.
A Trump landslide? Who'd have thought of that? In the meantime, here's my advice for all those anorexic Hollywood starlets. I wouldn't be starving yourself so you can fit into that glitzy Armani frock for the Biden inauguration ball quite yet.